Hey guys, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Hope everything is going on good for you and have fun. All right, I just got something I want to talk about, and there are gonna be more parts to this, but I just want to start right now. You know, it's whether um, Christianity is good for Africa. Western Christianity. Let me put that out. Is good for Africa. And when I look at, I'll point some things out because I've started to feel like the Africans should look at Islam. But I'm not saying we become Muslims. No, we don't have to. But we need to look at which of these two religions, and then look at the two religions, look at our traditional way of doing things, and take them and then try to fit them into one of these religions. And which one does it fit better? That's just an experiment I would like everyone to do. I'm not telling anyone to be a Christian. I'm not telling anyone to be a Muslim. But this is just my thoughts. And I've started to realize that when you look at Christianity, its foundations are in Africa and the Middle East. All right, what today is known as the Middle East. So in Africa and the Middle East, this is where its foundations are. Now, you get taken out of this place. Remember, Akhenaten studied monotheism. A lot of things in the Bible you will find in Egyptian writing. If you look at Ma'at, the fixed winged creature before the so-called angels ever existed, was Ma'at. If you look at the Ten Commandments and you look at the affirmations of Ma'at, you find that there's a lot of similarities there. So that's what I mean when I say he started from. And when you look at even Genesis, I think Genesis 12, it mentions about the Eden being in Africa. It says the same river that passes through Ethiopia, and I reckon it's talking about the Nile River, and it mentions Ethiopia as being part of where the Garden of Eden was. So the foundation of Christianity are in Africa and the Middle East. If we're just being honest. And then this religion gets taken to Europe. And the reason why every country in Europe has its own version of Christianity. You go to Russia, they have their own version. The French have their own version. You can find Catholic churches, organizations in all these European countries. But most of these people don't like the Catholics, except for Italians. And you know what? Because Catholicism is actually an Italian sort of a version of Christianity. And if you look at Catholicism and worshipping of statues and all that stuff, it's very similar to Italian traditions. So they've taken Christianity, spiced it up with their own things. So it's sort of similar to what they already know. So it doesn't bring so much confusion. And what used to happen as Catholicism traveled in other European countries, people would rebel and then they pick up and start their own thing. And then we go to America, that's when we have the Pentecostals and all these people who came out in the early 1900s. Most of these churches started then. They're not that old. They haven't been there for 2,000 years old. Okay? And you can see a lot of these people, they hate Catholicism. Some people don't even know why. They hate it. But they just brought up that way. They hate Catholicism. And mainly it's because they don't like Italian tradition. It's very rare you're going to find an Italian who doesn't like it, who lives in Italy and doesn't like Catholicism. It's very rare, But when it came to Africa, they never allowed us to add our own spices to it. If you go to the Italians, Jesus used to look Italian. You go to whatever, everywhere you go, Jesus looked like them. It's like the Buddha. In India, the Buddha looks Indian. In other parts of the Asia, the Buddha looks like those people, which was normal. But when it came to Africa, Christianity never allowed that. And they brought their own traditions. Western traditions, which had incorporated into Christianity, they brought that package to the Africans. And we had to take it on. So we had to worship a Jesus who doesn't look like us. And the whole idea was that we were inferior, or we were caste, or some stupid thing like that. You know, and Christianity has been at the forefront of preaching this inferiorism theory of black people. Has been at the forefront of enslaving black people. Right? Let's just be honest. I'm not trying to beat about the bush here. Okay? Now, this is the thing I want you to look at now. I look at Islam. Islam's the same thing. They've enslaved Africans. They've done, the only difference I see between Islamic enslaving and Christianity enslaving is that Islamic enslaving, when the Muslim had kids, he took care of his kids. With the black woman, those were his kids. Whereas in European or Christianity enslaving, they didn't want anything to do with the kids. You know, the kids will still be slaves, even if they're his own seed. That's how crazy this Christian thing is, right? But I've been thinking about a few things lately. I look at how people in the Middle East eat and the way Africans eat. It's the same thing. You know, there's so many similarities. People sit down around and everyone is eating from pretty much the same sort of dish. You know, you go to Ethiopia, you go around Africa, you find similar stuff, right? Then you look at how in Africa, we are more community. You know, that's why the way we used to live before Christianity was what is known as communalism. So we lived as a community. So everything is done to protect the community. So the community rights are more important than individual rights. And this is where you find, and it's something in Africa. In the Islamic world, it's not very common to have people walking around kissing in the streets and all that stuff. In Africa, same thing. True African tradition. You know, you're not going there around kissing people in the streets. But then the Western comes out and everyone sees everyone kissing and thinks, oh, that's the right way. And everyone now is kissing everyone in the streets. You know, in the Western world, individual rights are protected. In Africa, as well as in the Islamic world, community rights are protected. And the reason for not being so open about showing your lovey-dovey kind of thing is because you don't know who's watching. We don't want to start seeing kids start looking at things that were younger at what adults do and stuff like that. In my opinion, that's a good thing. It's something the world needs now. You know, because they're making these kids grow up real fast. You know, so the community, that's one thing that I found to be quite important. And also, I like something about Islam. Islam never teaches you to look the other way when someone slaps you. It teaches you to fight back. And this is why it's been quite hard for Western powers to sort of colonize people in the Middle East, because they've known war for a long time. You know, that's all they know. They've known war for a long time. They fight back. You know, they are not easily shaken. And that's the difference. You know, so personally, I truly believe that we have more, if we just wanted to create something out of all these religions, I reckon we'll pick up more stuff from Christianity. I mean, from Islam. You know, I'm not a Muslim. I'm more of a Christian, but I'm looking at Christianity and what it stands for. I'm looking at Islam and what it stands for. And I could be wrong, but this is why it's just a discussion. It's up to you. Because I think at the end of the day, Islam might be the one that's standing. Why do I say this? It's because the Muslims are intolerant And what do I mean by that? And that's not in a bad way. If the Quran says no gay people, these guys say no gay people, because that's what the Quran says. They're not trying to change it. And everyone, the way of life is dictated by what the Quran said. In the Christian world, it's not like that. It used to be like that. But then, because this is not the original not the original religion of Europe, a lot of people struggled. That's why when it was like that, people took advantage of it. You know, people abused it because it's not their thing. So they saw that and took advantage, abused people. You have the hammer of witches, and where they killed a lot of people. It was crazy. It was literally crazy. People had so much power back then. If Second World War, the Pope had enough power to even stop that war. He didn't want to stop because it was on one of the sides. You know, maybe he enjoyed what was happening. But back in the day, Christians had so much power in Europe. A lot of power. Right? But nothing good came out of it. Okay? That's why these days people challenge that. You know, in the Bible, if it says women are not supposed to be at the pulpit, today you can't do that. Most Christian churches have women because they're not following what the Bible is saying. They're following what the culture at the moment is. You know, in some places they even have gay. I'm not homophobic, but the Bible is not for gay people. Let's just be real. You know, when I was growing up, I was told that's the greatest sin. You know, but now I realize the Bible doesn't even say that sin is sin, but people have put so much emphasis on that. If you look at Sodom and Gomorrah, the reason why they were destroyed is because men started marrying men. Okay? But today, there's probably a gay preacher somewhere. And also, if you look at the churches, a lot of these churches that are coming up, the music they play, sometimes you can't even tell the difference between rap music and when you're in a church. It's guitars and it's loud as hell. You know, and then when you look at the churches, they don't look like a place of worship. They just don't look like that. That's because you can have a building and there's a cross on it. Nah. But if you go to the Middle East, their mosques are some of the most well-built buildings in those areas. And that's because that's where it's a house of God or house of whoever, like their creator. So it's respected. There's light coming. Most of the churches, when you look around these so-called Pentecostal, they're like dark. The church I go to, it's I say, oh, now we're gonna go in to get hypnotized. You go in there and it's black, and the reason why it's black is because they wanna, you know, bring out the screens and all this stuff. But I'm like, when I'm outside, I'm looking at the phone. I go into the screen. I go in the church. I'm looking at the screen. It's too much screen time. I want to go into a church and I experience God, and God is light. Why is this place so dark? You know, but it's not about God. It's about these images popping and us being sort of, I don't know, electrified in a way with these electronics around us. You know, and that's the erosion of Christianity. And eventually it's going to have no value. Whereas the guys in the Middle East, everything will continue. I know they tried to push them about, oh, they mistreat women. But look at the Bible, it's the same. Even when Paul was preaching, I think in Antioch or whatever, women had to cover their hair. But today, Christianity, most of these Christians, they like to put a spin on all of these things. You know, and let's talk about one thing, polygamy, right? I understand when I was growing up, this was made as if it was something to be scared of. You know, the Bible itself is full of men who were God's men, who had multiple wives. And I get it. There's a verse in the Bible that says, men, love your woman as Christ loved the church, or something like that. And I get that. And yes, Christ died for the church. So if you are to die for a woman, you can't have many lives. You can't die for this woman and die for another woman and die for another woman. That's the Christian, individualistic, European way of thinking. Okay? I've thought about this quite a lot. And I've realized in Africa, as well as in the Middle East, it's not about an individual, because that's what we think of. Oh, he marries 3 women. And we're thinking, oh, they're having one big MF OG or something like that. Nah, it's nothing like that. In Africa, a woman who lives 3-4 blocks from you as a child, if that woman saw you doing something bad, they will discipline you. They have every right to get you and whack your bum and then bring you to your parents. Because you know why? Because the priority is the community. They are doing it so that they can produce the best children in that community. Everyone is your mother. So polygamy is not about the individual man. Even the man himself doesn't have that concept of individual, or it's about my satisfaction. Nah, that's not the case. It's about the community. You know, let's ask ourselves these questions. Where would you rather be? In a community, let's say, that allows polygamy, where men maybe have, let's say, 4 wives, and these 4 wives have kids, but the man is there. You know, he goes to work, teaches his kids. There's community bonding. Or a place where men and women don't even get along. They are separated. Women, the kids, have no mentor because their dad is not in their life. Which society do you think will produce better children? Let's just ask ourselves that question. So, in Africa as well as the Middle East, polygamy is not looked upon in an individualistic way. It's looked upon as a community. You know, that's why you even find, if there was a big guy maybe who could work as much as, if it takes an average man to cut the tree down in 2 days, this guy can cut it in 2 hours. He might end up even having more wives because he can look after them. So that's and also when you look at, so that's how we have to look at it. Don't just go here. Let's just not, and I'm not saying people everywhere should be looking at polygamy as, oh, that's the way to go. If you're in Europe, you should be a polygamist. Nah, it's not. What I'm trying to say is that I want you to think about it. Just to think about it. And especially for people that have traveled, because people don't live the same way we live in the West. People, it's not about wake. Most people don't do that. There could be 3 months of working, you grow your stuff, the rain comes, you go and make sure everything is growing fine every now and then, and the other 2 months is you are harvesting. And then the rest of the day, the rest of the time, the food is there, everything is there, and people are happy. So the father can come home, and the elderly, they're all together, family. It's a very different lifestyle, but we try to look at it from the Western version and then try to put that into all these other countries. But that's not how these people live. If you live in the West, you're probably a split between a Democrat and the Republican. But if you live in the rest of the world, things are not so split. You could have one party that has the values of Democrats and Republicans in one party. If you go to the Middle East, it's a kingdom, right? But there's a system there that incorporates everything Republicans want and everything Democrats want. That's in Saudi Arabia. You want free education as a Republican? Yeah, we want free education. All right, there you got it. You have it. You want minimal government intervention? Oh well, there you go. You got it. In one system or political party, the rest of the world is not divided, guys. They don't look at, it's not polarized like the way we are in the West. It's not like that. And that's why I would encourage most of you guys to travel so you know how these things operate. Let's talk about alcohol. The Bible is very clear. Alcohol is not good. You know, in Africa, as well as the Middle East, in the Middle East, they just say no alcohol. But that does not mean there are no Muslims drinking alcohol. There is. But it's not something they want to promote. It's not something you're going to see these advertisings, billboards on TV. Nah, it's not. They don't want to do stuff like that. You know, in Africa, there was never, before colonization, there was no place like a pub that had alcohol. Nah, the alcohol was going to be served during ceremonies. Okay? It was like special occasions, which didn't happen every day. So there was no one drinking alcohol every day. You can't just go and get drunk. It never worked like that. Okay? And that's the thing I'm talking about. The Bible says no alcohol, but you find most people drink, I just drink a little bit of wine, because that's their culture. So they've put their culture into this, and they've found ways to make it, to simplify what the Bible says, you know. And this is what's, but in the Muslim way, it just says no alcohol. African culture can fit in so well in there that we don't need alcohol. You know, the gender roles. I've started to believe, because in Africa there's this thing they focus on so much these days about girl power, girl child, you know, which is an European version, because European look at African men as these savages for some reason. We're just out there mistreating our women, which is not true, but that's how they look at it. And there's there are these programs which they fund, which are promoting girl child, right? But just the other day I heard in Zambia, these kids were abducting these girls for ransom or something like that. And in a lot of parts across Africa, as more attention is given to the girls and less attention to the boys, the girls ain't safe. They can be as educated as they can be, the girls ain't safe. What we are forgetting, which in the Middle East they haven't forgotten, men are the backbone of every society. Look about what's happening in Ukraine. You know, have you seen, it was men that want to go to Ukraine and fight from all across the Western world, even some people in Africa. Men wanting to go there to fight. Yeah, women, there's probably women fighting as well, but it's not something that's been promoted right now. And I'm pretty sure there's more women maybe helping out in hospitals and all that stuff than there is on the battlefield. This has just happened. This is 2022 I'm talking about. It's not 100 years ago. But we are being forced to sort of cross off these gender roles. That does not mean women have to be mistreated. No, that's not what I'm trying to say here. You know, you gotta remember that the Dahomey was an all-women army. But remember, these women were trained by men, and they had a king. Okay? So we can promote these ideas, Western ideas of, girl child. But I think the right thing to do is to educate the men more so that the men can create a better and safer environment for women, where women can also succeed in whatever they want to do. That's the right way to do things. That's not to say we gotta mistreat women or stop women from becoming this. Nah. But let's teach women. Let's teach men how to create a better environment for women. You know, and women in that environment, they can succeed and do whatever they want to do. For me, that's the better way of doing it. I'm just going to go back to alcohol again, because I can see how alcohol is destroying communities in Africa. You know, when you look at in South Africa, the thing that where South African brewery came from, South Africa is probably now it's called Sab Miller. It's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest brewery company in the world. They are the #1 brewery company in China. In Australia, they've spent billions of dollars buying up other breweries. And I'm pretty sure in Europe, they've done the same thing. But most of that company grew from abusing or making black people in the little in little black towns in South Soweto and whatever get addicted to alcohol. And the whole idea was they'll go to work, they do all the labor work, they come out, the guys will be supplying alcohol 5 o'clock. So it's like just from work you go and drink alcohol, and then they go home, and eventually that becomes addictive. And what happens with alcohol, you start becoming abusive with women and all that stuff. And that was all set up. But now they don't even need to set it up now. It's just there. If you go to Zambia, you find young boys, and this is in most parts of Africa, except I would say you see very little of it in places like Zanzibar, which is Muslim. Most of the guys' entertainment there is watching soccer. That's the main entertainment. But in parts where there's freedom, so much freedom and westernized in Africa, you find kids at 6 o'clock in the morning drinking alcohol. Teenagers drinking alcohol. They're not going to school, because obviously free education is not free in some parts of some countries in Africa. And they don't have a parent who's paying for that. So they're now on the street, and all they do is drink alcohol, come across whatever, just to let them get high. And this is what I'm saying. But if we adopted the Islamic way of saying no alcohol, which means we're not giving money to all these big European companies, we can actually create a better society and go back, a little bit back, to our traditions. Our traditions are far more superior than the Western traditions. I tell you that now. I tell you that. But what we need to do, instead of us wiping them off and bringing in Western culture, is for us to look at that and see where we can improve and say, maybe this is not right. Let's stop that. Maybe let's change that. And that's how you evolve as a society. But what has happened to us is, that's why these days I laugh when I see be it the Zulus or some other people, African traditional warriors, and they're still with spears. And I'm like, dude, we are stuck in time. Don't tell me, like with what Shaka did among the Zulus over 100 and something years ago, that he made some changes there. So don't tell me that for 100 years that was going to be the only change we are going to have. Nah. These so-called African traditional armies, shouldn't be an African traditional army right now. There should be just an African army in every country, whether it's South Africa or whatever. Don't go, this is a Zulu. No. Let us evolve. Let us evolve and create a machine of men that are protecting the land, protecting our women and children. That is more important than getting stuck in time and say, this is our tradition. No, even tradition can change. Tradition evolves. So I just want us to have this discussion. I truly believe African tradition fits in well with Islamic tradition. And I think it's something that governments in Africa need to study. They truly need to study. People in the Middle East, they live in the sun, it's hot. And yet, they have less cancer than those that live in Australia, where it's also hot. And one of the reasons why that is? Because the difference is huge. It's very noticeable. I think it's like 100 per 1,000 people, where in Australia maybe it's like 300 per 1,000 people, something like that, die of cancer. Don't quote me on this, but the difference is very noticeable. And one of the reasons is that actually that time during Ramadan, that 1 month where they're fasting, cancer needs sugar, cancer cells need sugar to grow. And if you ain't providing them with that for a month, if they were just about to start, they're more likely to die. That's why these days you see a lot of people adopting intermittent fasting for good health. But when you go back in time, about 1500 years ago, there was a European person that visited the Gambia, and he noticed that these people only had a meal a day. They didn't do it because they had no food. They did it because they believed it was for good health. They'll have a meal a day and then they'll snack for the rest of the day. That was in the Gambia, in Africa, 1500 years ago. And this is what I say. African tradition fits in well with the Middle East. And if we look at the Middle East, look at Saudi Arabia, they've managed to protect their resources. They got one of the biggest wealth fund as a nation. They are one of the biggest companies in Saudi Aramco in the world. You go to the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, all these countries there in that federation, they are well funded, well protected. They have used their resources quite well. But when you come to Africa, which is Christians, slap me on this side, I'll give you another side for you to slap. Things haven't happened that way. So what I'm saying is, it's something I would like. It's a discussion, guys. I'm not telling you to become a Muslim. I'm not a Muslim myself, but I've just, as a grown man who can just not follow what people are saying, who can say, you know what, I have my own mind and I'll study this and I'll make my own decisions based on what my results are and see which one is better. I honestly think Africa has more to benefit economically, spiritually, and just traditionally, if we can adopt some of the things that they have, the mindset in the Middle East, investing in men to create a better society for women, where we don't start to bend gender roles, where women knows her roles, a man knows his roles, or his role, what his role is. If we can stop alcohol, stop making it as this thing that you need to have. If we stop teaching our kids to do that from a very young age, that means doesn't mean we take alcohol away, but we don't make it as we don't advertise it, we don't have that, we don't, and we try to minimize the number of bars and stuff in our communities. That will put us on the right path. All right, guys, I think I've talked for too much. Let me hear what you think about this. Please, thank you, and appreciate you guys. Thank you. Goodbye.